Hello, I'm Michael Polster, Senior Vice President at National Analysts Worldwide, a firm now celebrating its centennial as the world's first business research organization. As a firm that helped shape many of the research techniques now considered standard, we have always had points of view about the newest as well as the oldest methods in the toolbox. One of the very newest is neuromarketing, and in the next few minutes I'd like to review it and what it currently does and does not offer marketers and market researchers. Before I start, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my qualifications to join this debate. I am trained as an academic neuropsychologist and am, in fact, a co-author of the first paper published in Nature that used functional neuroimaging to identify neurological correlates of cognitive processing. As a result, I consider myself in a unique position to demystify neuromarketing, a term much discussed these days, but not necessarily well understood. Neuromarketing loosely refers to a variety of techniques that aim to identify neural correlates of reactions to advertising and ultimately purchase decisions. The most powerful technique for taking pictures of the brain is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, which can be used to create images of the brain based on the flow of oxygen in the blood. Using fMRI, it is possible to record and compare activity levels in distinct brain regions when a stimulus is present and absent, and use the difference as a measure of the impact of the stimulus. A stimulus that triggers higher levels of activity in areas of the brain associated with positive emotion or memory is assumed by neuromarketers to be more valuable than a stimulus that triggers lower or no activity in those regions. There is undeniable intuitive appeal to the concept of using brain imaging techniques to expose motivations because it appears to eliminate the need for direct reporting, which is always a source of error. On the other hand, critical analysis suggests that the financial and intellectual yield of neuromarketing research have yet to be demonstrated. Our industry seems captivated by what for the moment is a sexy fad and a costly one too. Functional imaging equipment costs millions of dollars to purchase, and machine time rental is likely to be cost prohibitive for all but the most zealous. Cost aside, there are few peer-reviewed papers published on the subject, and none of them demonstrates unequivocally that changes in brain function are associated with, much less able to predict, purchasing behavior. Although books in cyberspace are filled with tantalizing anecdotes, what's sorely lacking is physiological proof or clear commercial validation. A case in point is the highly publicized example involving New Scientist magazine, in which tweaking a magazine cover based on the results of neuromarketing techniques supposedly led to increased sales. The finding received significant attention in the press, but lacked methodological rigor for a variety of reasons. For example, the report failed to indicate whether or not the cover that was selected based on physiological findings actually differed from the preferred cover based on traditional metrics, such as preference, which is presumably an outcome needed to justify the investment in neuromarketing decision support. Some proponents of neuromarketing claim that they cannot publish the type of detailed scientific reports required to validate the technique because results are proprietary. The dearth of properly controlled experimental investigations in the literature may, however, actually be a consequence of two more fundamental issues that raise serious doubts about the ability of physiological changes to predict behavior in any but the shortest of time frames. First, neuronal effects appear to be short-lived and sometimes erratic. The celebrated subliminal hidden persuasion of the early 60s, a forerunner of neuromarketing, failed to turn consumers into Stepford wives of Madison Avenue because the measured effects lasted just seconds or minutes, not days or weeks. Similarly, recent reports of individual neurons firing in response to a picture of a famous person, for example, the Halle Berry neuron, also suggest that those neurons are quite fickle. They respond one day, but not the next. Second, there is likely a mismatch between the functional organization of the brain and the methodologies used to measure its function. Most brain functions are widely distributed across nonlinear networks that involve excitation and inhibition of millions of neurons. Yet a simple linear subtraction methodology is used to measure changes in performance in response to critical stimuli. For that reason, in a review article in the journal Nature in 2008, one of the foremost fMRI methodologists concluded that it is, quote, an excellent tool for formulating intelligent data-based hypotheses, but only in certain special cases can it really be useful for unambiguously selecting one of them, end quote. It appears, therefore, that the basic claim made by proponents of neuromarketing, the ability to distinguish between ads or concepts based on neuroimaging data, is directly refuted by one of the developers of the technology. So here's where we land on the subject. Neuromarketing may someday represent a valuable market research tool, but that horizon may well be decades away due to the complexities of interpreting the brain's responses to marketing materials and the challenges associated with demonstrating a neuro half-life long enough to impact behavior. If we want to establish whether the neuromarketing emperor is wearing any clothes, our obligation is to conduct and publish well-controlled experiments which prove two things. First, that physiological data alter the decision that marketers would have made if traditional measurements of preference were used. And second, that the resulting decisions have a material effect on the desired consumer behavior, such as purchase. Until then, market researchers in search of fresh insight are at risk of being seduced by an idea that is not yet fully understood. We all may be better served by continuing to innovate around skilled interpretation and validation of the data we collect using other metrics.